welcome to The Actor and the Engineer. My name is Paul James. I'm the actor.
And my name is Josh Knapp. I'm the broadcast engineer.
Here we go, Josh. I am so tempted, but I'm not going to do it.
I mean, like I said, we can sing all we want.
But then you said before the podcast, we can sing it because legally we're out of tune, so it won't be.
We're not perfectly in tune. I cannot sound like a trumpet. I'm very sorry. It's not part of my repertoire.
I was kicked out of the 8th grade choir because I was flat in the cellar. That's what I was told. So,
okay.
So I'm not going to, that's my public singing issues. Yeah. Although strangely enough, I've played a couple characters where I've had to sing in the middle of a monologue or whatever, which is odd, but I just don't treat it as a song. You know, if I had to sing a whole song on stage, no, I couldn't do it. There's no way.
That's the other thing about musicals is just like, it's like everybody's got to be on board with somebody just like breaking out in song. So you just got to be ready for that, you know? So
I'm just used to it. I don't even think about that anymore. I just go with it.
And
you know?
why hasn't there been an Indiana Jones musical? They're making musicals of everything else.
Don't say that out loud ever again. I will refer to Spider-Man. Turn off the dark. Don't do it. Just don't. And if they do it and they ruin it, I'm blaming you. I'm personally blaming you.
That's actually the biggest thing I got from all of this, like going back and watching all the Indiana Jones movies, which I did, and watching this new Indiana Jones movie, is that nobody and no thing and no movie, no take, no anything can ruin Indiana Jones for me, because I've gotten so much joy out of this series of movies that it is completely safe in my heart, and I don't feel like there's anything that could actually like just take that away from me. It is something that has been given to me by all the craftspeople and the actors and the writers and the directors and everything, and it is something that's given me so much joy throughout my life. We've said it before. I'm going to say it again that Raiders of the Lost Ark is my favorite movie of all time. So it is infinitely watchable. And I think there's other movies in this series that are just as fun, maybe not as good to me, but also infinitely watchable for me. So I'm excited to talk about Indiana Jones. I feel like I've been preparing my whole life for this exact moment. So
researching your whole life. So you just said something that I want to talk about. You said anybody's take on it, meaning somebody's negative take on it. Sure. Like, oh, we're going to tear this apart, blah, blah, blah. Listen, they're missing the point. And the reason why it's your favorite movie of all time is probably you have personal reasons, and obviously because it brings you joy and so forth and so on. It doesn't necessarily, I've talked about this before when it comes to the Oscars. Just because Shakespeare in Love won doesn't, and you wanted Saving Private Ryan to win, doesn't make Shakespeare in Love a bad movie, right? It doesn't make it a bad movie. It's just not the movie that most people at this point in the game thinks should have won. It doesn't make it a bad movie though. If you put it as a standalone film, it's great. I just rewatched it. So the point is that it doesn't matter what anybody else thinks. And if they're not willing, it's like getting on a roller coaster ride and criticizing that the hill wasn't steep enough, or that the turn wasn't sharp enough, or that the circle didn't really give me that gut wrenching feeling. Dude, but you still had fun on the roller coaster ride, and you still waited in line, and you still screamed, and you still clapped afterwards, and you still had this like communal experience with everybody you're riding with on those cars at that particular moment. So anybody who goes into a long tirade or goes into any kind of analytical study about Indiana Jones and not being good movies, it's just okay, good luck with the rest of your life, because where do you get joy then? You know?
Well,
and I love the fact that you get this much joy out of it. I love it because and we now have 9 years of experience of talking with you. And if anybody listens, they know that your taste in music is woohoo. You know, there's some things that are like borderline, just right on the edge for me, where I'm like, wow, that's
music
dark.
Or movies? You said music. Do you mean movies?
Did I say music?
Okay.
I meant movies.
I mean, my taste in music is okay. Like I don't listen to a lot of like experimental jazz or anything, but you know.
I meant movies. The point was that if anybody was to listen, there's not tinsel in the water. There's blood in the water with your take on movies.
Yeah,
So
sure.
the fact that Indiana Jones is top is just thrilling to me because oh, look, there's one in the back over there. I just noticed in the back of your room. It thrills me because you have such a deep, rich understanding of movies that this popcorn film, which has a lot of depth and a lot of soul in it, is your favorite movie. I love that. I love it.
Well, and I think that that for me the reason why I am able to because I'm critical of every movie that I watch in the way that I don't take things for granted, and I don't want to be force fed. You're the same way, I know, and I don't want to be I don't want to be taken for granted. As an audience member, I feel like sometimes some movies are like, oh, they just want this, they just want that. And so for me with Indiana Jones, it does a really good job of, from the very first selection of shots of the first movie, Raiders of the Lost Ark, it does a great job of setting up a character, and it shows you that this first movie, and ultimately the movie franchise, is centered around a very strong character. And I think that's what, if you look at all the movies that are in my top 10, they usually center around a strong character or a strongly formed character. It may not even be a character that's strong in the movie. I like Brazil, and that's a character that goes through a lot. It starts off as a very weak character and moves through the movie. But with Indiana Jones, this guy is just this, like, I mean, the way that he's shown on screen, it's done in such a romantic way, and not romantic as in like, the film wants to kiss him, but romantic as in like, it's not realistic. It's very, it's just so iconic, and it is evocative of a particular amount of, strength, confidence. He knows what's going to happen before it happens, that kind of a thing. But then the movie kind of flips the character on its side. I have written down here, like, there's like kind of three things. Harrison Ford has an infinite amount of charm in most of the movies that he's in, and they kind of use that charm, Steven Spielberg and the writers of multiple movies in the series. They use his charm to give the character certain scenes where he's like either inept or caught off guard, and he's just kind of like, when he gets punched by the bald guy in Raiders of the Lost Ark, and they're fighting around the plane, and he just like his knees buckle, and it looks like something from Looney Tunes. Like, it just looks completely. So you've got your, this character who I just said is like, is confident and knows everything that's going to happen before, and he just gets rocked, and it's just, it's a little off, and it's something you wouldn't expect out of a, quote unquote, somebody who's knows all the answers, and somebody who's the perfect whatever, perfect man or whatever, but they all allow it to poke fun at him. And I think that they do a good balance of that, where, yeah, maybe he's the smartest guy in the room, but also he's kind of a goof. Like, he's like super into a very specific archaeological things, and he's not like whatever into cars and rolling up cigarettes in his sleeve and all that stuff, but he still exudes all of this, confidence, and then there's love stories in each of the movies, and so, well, not all of them, but ultimately I guess there are love stories in all of them. So yeah, I'll say that.
I guess it depends on how you define that. If you're talking about a relationship love story, no, not in every one of them, but there is a relationship story in each of them. And that actually brings up one of my first points about the series, because I've watched all of the films now, and the truth of the matter is I'd never watched Temple of Doom all the way through. Not that I remember, because you got
to the part where he rips out somebody's heart, and you're like, I'm good.
I think I was just at an age where I was aging out. I aged out of Raiders right before it happened. And so my suspension of disbelief, which is really strong, which is strange, because then in the same year I went and saw Batman, the first Batman movie, and just like totally believed that Batman
That's Last Crusade.
Oh, that's Last Crusade. Okay.
Yeah.
Which I think I saw in the theater, but can't remember. And then when I rewatched it, I was like, I've definitely seen this all the way through. I know exactly. I could not have told you what was happening next, but once it happened, I was like, oh, I remember that. Oh, I remember that. Oh, I remember that. But the point to what I was getting ready to say was that you're right. They write that character and they write these movies as if the audience is the smartest person in the room. They assume that you're going to understand that Marion and him have a relationship before this film starts. And all of the stuff that's interjected is stuff that we don't see as an audience. We don't see that movie before it happens. We don't see the movie after it happens. They're smart. They think that the audience is smart, or they know that the audience is smart, so they don't have to write a ton of different stuff to give you a backstory, blah, blah, blah. There's just these lines that are interjected. When they first discover where they have to go in Raiders, he says, you think she's still there? And that's the only line, indicating that there's going to be somebody who comes in from his past, but you don't know that this person is going to be as important as she turns out to be. And then the dialogue between them, and the fact that there's 100 things that have been said before she turns and goes, I knew you were going to walk into my life again, Indiana Jones, whatever the line is. But it's so well done. And the acting is superb on so many different levels for something that people could just be like phoning it in and not taking it seriously, but they do. And there's depth to the characters. So you believe her when you go, oh, something bad happened. And we don't know him yet, not fully, but by the second or third movie, you're like, oh, Marion knew something was going on. Number. Yeah, well, she sure did.
And they give her the same amount. Actually, they give her the same kind of like heroic introduction in Raiders of the Lost Ark as they do him. I mean, really, they kind of set her up in this. They give her the same amount of weight because she's in that drinking competition, back and forth with that huge Mongolian dude. And so I mean, she's set up as an equal at the beginning of the movie, which if this was just like if she's just a damsel in distress, which they do play on the damsel in distress trope later on. But if she is just a damsel in distress, there would be no reason. That's just wasted, film right there, setting up her character like that. So, but the way that they have them play against each other is also not traditional. And even though this is based off of like 1930s, 1950s serials that George Lucas saw when he was a kid, it was still something that was made in 1981, written in 1981, and written for something that was a little bit more complex than just like, we need a lady to wrap across the train tracks. So that I think is a little bit more respect given to her.
It would be disrespectful to his character. Oh, that he would be attracted to a woman who would just want to be saved, or just is going to be saved. Not that she would want it. I'm saying that if she was just the damsel in distress, which she does play that part a couple of times, but it goes back and forth.
It's worse than Temple of Doom, and rewatching that, it's just like it's a little bit more phoned in there. I mean, I'm not saying necessarily Kate Capshaw's performance. It would be hard for me to say that she didn't do what she was told to do, in the writing,
scripted
and
to do,
in the direction by her future husband. And so, I don't know, but you look at those two movies, you look at the female characters in Raiders and Temple of Doom, and you kind of see that there are holes in the series. I'm not saying the series is perfect, but yeah.
But I have justifications for everything, because I have fallen in love with this series, and the justification for Kate Capshaw's character is she's 10 years behind physically and mentally where Marion is when we first meet her. She has not had adventures like Marion and Indiana Jones have had, or whatever their history is. You get their history that they were equals at the time, and she's trying to be that throughout that movie, Temple of Doom. She's trying to be like, I can take care of myself, and then she's like, no, and
bugs
talking. Which is, everybody has that reaction to the bugs and the snakes and now eels and ripping out somebody's heart. And, it's like, Marion's probably seen some things by time Raider starts. What's Kate Capshaw's character's name? Do you know it offhand?
Willie Scott.
Yes. She doesn't know as much, but she also, she kind of steps up. She steps up. She's like, oh no, not again. And little Short Round, who's so adorable. That little kid is
Ki Hui Kwan. Oh,
Academy Award winner.
correct.
The way he fights and his little body, it's so well done. It's so well done. He's so little though. He's so little, and he kicks some butt.
Yeah.
And it's supposed to be a little bit more comical as it should. But I also believe that, like, I mean, there's a couple times when he comes and starts beating on people behind their back when they're doing something. He's not going to do any good because he's the size of their leg.
Yeah.
And so that's what I mean by him being so small. It's like, it's illogical that he could have any effect, but he is so strong-willed. And it's like, you could see the future if you look very clearly at it. So yeah, so I think that, and then you come to the third film, The Last Crusade, and the ingenue, for lack of a better term, the female lead is kind of a double agent, You're not sure what's going on. She's as strong, but is she? She's seen some things. She's got some bad people in her life. She's doing some. And so it's sort of a play on both those two first female characters in Raiders and Temple of Doom. So I thought that was interesting. And then you get to the fourth film and you're like, wait, what just happened? She's back.
Mm-hmm.
Why did they bring Mary? See, I did not know because I had never seen it. I did not know
until recently?
Just 2 weeks ago.
Okay.
I started to watch it and I just couldn't. I was that guy who's the cynical guy in the theater going, this is absurd. And it is the most absurd. It is. The ending is just ridiculous. But
I get a little bit of charge. I get a little bit of charge in some scenes. I think some scenes are pretty well done. But
I think there's a lot of great things because of her, because of Karen Allen.
Yeah.
Karen Allen brings something to that movie that I don't think it had. And Shia LaBeouf is excellent in it too. And he's taken that on his shoulders that he thinks he ruined that film. I disagree. I think they thought it was a little too late in Indy's history, meaning the whole idea of Indiana Jones, to actually pull out spoilers for this film, to actually pull out aliens and see them float away. It's too much. It's way too much. We can handle snakes. We can handle rituals. We can handle Nazis being lasered through their eyes. We can handle the 3 gems in Temple of Doom. We can handle the cup.
Stones.
We can handle... Okay, so I have to digress and go back to Last Crusade because I have to ask you this in order to understand the next 2 films afterwards. Okay, in The Last Crusade, it is stated that if you drink from the cup, that you will have everlasting life. So
if you stay within the seal.
Oh, okay.
That's why when they cross the seal, Henry Jones Sr. Ultimately will die.
Okay, and India eventually.
The healing that happened inside that tomb, inside that temple area, the healing that happened, what was healing, and so his insides and his skin and all that stuff was healed. But the moment that he left, even though he had drank from the cup, and Indy also, the moment that he left, that they both left, they would forego their They would forgo their life, their everlasting life.
The cup is kind of a double-edged sword. Yes, you will have everlasting life, but only if you stay there in that area.
That's why that knight was so excited when they showed up, because he's like, "Oh my God, I can die now."
Yeah, yeah. Okay. My mind starts to wonder with certain stuff like where did he get food? Where did he blah, blah, blah. But there's a whole sect of people who help that out, right?
Yeah, the cruciform sword, like those guys, but I don't know if those guys necessarily know exactly. Like, I don't know if they're like bringing him Subway every other week or whatever, but it's probably a little bit different.
There's this new thing called fast food. Would you like to try some? Anything other than beef, whatever it may be. Yeah.
He's like, I really like chicken wings.
Yeah.
So I think that the cool part about one of the cool parts about Last Crusade, which I really love. I know we talked about we're gonna do like rankings, or that's probably my number two, Indiana Jones movie. But what I love about the Last Crusade is that now we're 3 films in, and you kind of feel like you can kind of play on a lot of the tropes that have been set up in the previous 2 movies, and by doing the same things, I mean. There's a lot of things that are established early on in the series, as far as like a strong MacGuffin, whether it's the Ark of the Covenant in the first one, the Shankara stones in the second one, and then now of course the Holy Grail. But that strong MacGuffin, like just his wardrobe is iconic. Like it's almost iconic immediately from the first film, but you've got the jacket, the hat, the whip, the satchel, all of that is the same. And then of course what they did with snakes in the first one, bugs in the second one, they do with rats in the third one. And so you kind of start to, by the third one especially, you start to expect certain things out of the film and out of the series, and they deliver on all of them in the third movie. The second movie, you don't really know like what to expect necessarily. And the second movie in a lot of ways is an outlier. It's a very negative movie. It's just and they also did a smart thing by putting it before, just by a year, but it was set a year before Raiders of the Lost Ark happens. So technically it's a prequel, but the reason why they did that is because the first time, so technically, chronologically, the first time you see Indiana Jones, he has smuggled something out of somewhere and is trying to sell it for a diamond. That is the first time we meet Indiana Jones. That's the beginning of Temple of Doom. So, and his whole fortune and glory thing, and him using Short Round. I mean, even though I'm sure Short Round's getting something out of it, but also at the same time, like he's just gaming, trying to game the system as an archaeologist at that point. And then throughout the film, he learns things or whatever. But still, it's totally kind of different than the beginning of Raiders, where he's like, that belongs in a museum. It's a different mentality. It's we go from fortune and glory to that belongs in a museum. I mean, it's kind of a total
but that makes sense. But that makes sense if it is a prequel. Yes. Which I was wondering about those dates. I was like, wait, did that just say 1936 or 19? Was it 30? When's Raiders?
36 to 37. 37.
Okay, that's what. Okay, that's what I thought. I was like, wait, and I didn't go back and look at Raiders. I was like, no. But if you think about it, it's the end of Temple of Doom, where the survival of that civilization is bent on him bringing back one of those stones. He sees the beauty of putting something where it's supposed to be. So it makes sense. Yeah. Sure, he could be trying to smuggle out something and trade it for a diamond, whatever. But at the end of Temple of Doom, he sees that actual thing that he could have very easily taken and done whatever he wanted with it, even put it in a museum. Yeah. He sees the value of that. It's not just an archaeological find. It's actually important to this civilization, this community, and it helps them thrive. And it sets up a precedence for the fact that it's not necessarily about gain or putting something in a museum or trying to figure out like how to make sure the whole world can see the Ark of the Covenant. It's about putting something where it's supposed to be. So that makes sense to me. I did not put together that it was a prequel. Okay, if that's what you want to call it.
Okay, it happened a year before. So, and I need to correct it. 35 was Temple of Doom, and 36 was Raiders of the Lost Ark.
So I was right. So 36, right?
Yeah,
is what I said.
And
okay,
then,
that's what I thought.
Yeah, and then of course we're into the we're into bigger Nazi times in Last Crusade. So I was gonna look that up too, but I think it's 38. So I thought it was 39, but yeah. So we're right. We're not into the proper World War II, but it is getting close. So and
then it jumps 20 years.
Yeah,
for Crystal Skull.
For Crystal Skull, it needs to, and because you're talking 50s, Area 51, and that's. I mean, I understand your reticence to say that, like, well, I understand you saying that aliens are that's too much. It's beyond the pale. Is that what you said?
Not what
Okay, well then tell me what you said again.
Okay, it's sort of what I said. I'm saying that the fantastical things that happen at the end of all of these films, including this new one,
Which it happens in every film.
which it happens in every film,
Yeah.
right? And they seem to, and even in this one, the new one,
Dial of Destiny, yes.
I accepted the finale easier than I accepted, because everything has to be destroyed and everything has to be hidden again. They discover it, they take something out, everything gets destroyed so nobody can deal with this again. So everything has to get destroyed at the end of Crystal Skull. So I get that, but it just seems like, I don't know. It's just, it's a little too, I don't know what I'm trying to say.
George Lucas-y.
Well, I mean, we've dealt with, or we've had Spielberg with Aliens his whole entire career, so there shouldn't be an issue with that per se. It's just, I don't know, something about it is so over the top that I don't know why I can't accept that as the ending.
Here's the way that I kind of like couched it for myself. Like, I'm not, it's my least favorite movie of all the Indiana Jones movies, but they are trying to meet Indiana Jones where he is at and where the world is at, and find the juiciest supernatural or outlandish thing, that MacGuffin that they can find. So at that moment in American history or world history, I guess, maybe, I don't know, at that moment, the whole alien landing, Area 51 thing was in the culture, in the same way that in the 30s, for both the first and third movies, Nazi Germany and the rise of Nazi Germany and what Nazi Germany was wanting to do with relation to archaeology, that was in the culture for Raiders and for Last Crusade. I'm not really sure about, colonized India and the 1930s and Shanghai and all of that. I really don't know why that was super exciting for George Lucas specifically, because he really pushed for this, this story, and why they like went with that for Temple of Doom. That seems to be an outlier to me. But when you look at Crystal Skull, when you look at not as much Dial of Destiny, we'll get into Dial of Destiny and what I think that they maybe could have done to make it to make it fit in with the in my opinion more superior Indiana Jones movies. But yeah, I mean, so since you don't have it, did you have the baggage of Crystal Skull before you went into it? Like, you knew that everybody thought it was crap, right?
Well, obviously. I mean, that's unavoidable, because when you go and look it up on IMDb, you can see the rankings and stuff like that. But but here's the thing: I never take that stuff. I take that stuff with a grain of salt, because I came out of Temple of Doom going, that movie's fun. Why is it so? Why is it so problematic to this world? And why have people bagged on it for such a long time? And now the reviews for Dial of Destiny comes out, and people are like, the much maligned Temple of Doom, not as bad as everybody says it is. It just takes some time for people to catch up with what the filmmakers actually meant. So I never think to myself, well, they thought it was a stinker, so I'm going to think it's a stinker. That's not how it was. I don't think it is my least favorite, and we can rank them in just a second if you want. It is my least favorite, and maybe that has to do with it. But there are problems after problem after problem, or issue after issue after issue with Crystal Skull that I didn't necessarily have a problem with Temple of Doom. Mm-hmm. It kept pulling me out. Things kept pulling me out. I'll give you a prime example: the sword fight between Shia LaBeouf and it pulls me right out. I'm like, okay, first of all, that should be between her and Marion. That would be very cool. Yeah. Second of all, but that's a cliche, so I understand why they didn't do it. Oh, let's take two strong females and make them fight together, because a female couldn't possibly fight another guy. So I understand why they did that, but it's too long, it's too illogical, and it's like, okay, when the raft goes over the water in Temple of Doom,
the first time, in Temple of Doom.
When it comes out of the plane.
Yes.
Doesn't it come out?
That's
okay.
Awesome.
You're like, it's totally awesome, but you're like, that would never happen in real life. They would die. For whatever reason, that to me made way more sense than the at stake in the perils they went through in Crystal Skull. I don't know why. It just is.
Even the boat car going down the waterfalls, like it's too much.
It is way too much. It is way too much. And okay, so is that, sorry, I haven't seen them as many times obviously as you have. So in that one, is that where they go over the 3 falls?
Yes.
They're okay.
And then they all fall out in the last one,
and the Crystal Skull.
And nobody breaks anything.
It's too much. Yeah. It's too much. It's up to this point in the
75-year-old Harrison Ford doesn't break a bone.
I wasn't going to say his age. I was thinking it though. I was thinking there's no way that this would ever. But something about the films, there's illogical things that happen constantly in these movies. But for whatever reason, because we believe that Marion can take care of herself, and now we know her child can too, and now that we know Indiana Jones can do it because he's proven it over and over again, we expect it's what's the expression? Just in the nick of time movies. That's what it is. And so we have come. That's part of the thrill. How are they going to get out of it? But it's so epically large in Crystal Skull that I can't buy it. And I'm thinking. Because one might say when we talk about Dial of Destiny, that what happens at the end of that film is really like even further out there and like really stretches your suspension of disbelief. But for whatever reason, I was like, that makes sense to me. Mm-hmm. I buy it. For whatever reason, I did not buy the spinning room and the big coming together of the crystal skulls. And then, I mean, when his head goes back on, that's totally cool. That whole thing is very cool.
We'll talk about it. I think that we've not seen I have not seen exactly a replica of what has happened at the end of Kingdom of Crystal Skull, and we have zero time to come to terms with it. Zero time to come to terms with what's happening at the end. Whereas at the end of Dial of Destiny, not giving anything away, that mechanism has been used in films forever. So it feels better to me as a movie going, as a an audience member. I'm like, okay, all right, we're doing that. Let's do it. How does that manifest? Is it done well? Is it done poorly? Let's move forward and see how they're going to treat this. So then you can judge it on how they did it or not. But as far as like, the big ask, it's less of a big ask for me, at least as a moviegoer, than Crystal Skull. So
100%. Okay, so I have to ask one thing before we move on. The Ark of the Covenant is in every film except for Temple of Doom and Dial of Destiny. A representation of the Ark of the Covenant is in every film except for those 2.
It's definitely in Crystal Skull and Ark.
And it's
Last Crusade.
Yes, it's in there. It's on the wall.
On the wall.
Yeah, she goes, "Are you sure?" And he goes, "Yeah, I'm pretty sure." When they see the drawing of the Ark of the Covenant.
Okay, drawing. Yes, yeah.
Yes,
okay.
A representation of the Ark of the Covenant.
Representation of it, yes. Uh-huh.
So it's definitely not in Temple anywhere. Are we sure?
No, I'm pretty sure. I saw Temple more as a kid than I saw as a kid than I saw Raiders, which is crazy to me. I've watched Raiders a lot more, but it was on HBO all the time. Like it was like when I was, it came out in 85, so that would have been like 86, 87. So I was probably like 6 years old and 7 years old, like watching Temple of Doom a lot. And I was like, that is not something that I would, queue up for a 7-year-old. So, I mean, I don't know.
They're way past that nowadays. Kids are way past that nowadays. They'd be like, that's fake. That's stupid. That's fake. You're 6. Enjoy the Goonies. Shut up.
Yeah. Well, Goonies is awesome.
Okay. Yeah, I know. Of course it is. But, okay, so, and it's nowhere in the Dial of Destiny. It's not on his desk, a picture of it. Not that we know.
Not that I saw. Sure? I mean, I've only seen it once. So
a couple of pictures of Marion, and then he puts the magnet, which is hilarious.
We'll get to it. Ooh.
Okay. All right. So do you want to rank them now, or do you want to rank them at the end of the podcast? Okay. You go first.
Oh, okay. I think I wrote it down, but it's Raiders first, then Last Crusade, then Temple of Doom, then Dial of Destiny, then Kingdom of the Crystal Skull.
I agree 100%. 100%. And it's interesting because because The Last Crusade is so well done, you see young Indy, that's great. River Phoenix.
Phoenix.
Yeah, I
the
know,
man.
right?
He was
He
the
is
man,
the
yeah.
man. He is the man. And then you have Sean Connery putting in, he's great. And then the nuances that come.
That's also James Bond. When you
Yeah,
think about it, like,
absolutely.
and I didn't realize it at the time because I hadn't watched all the James Bond movies when I was that young, but it's
so on the
Spielberg-
nose, it's hidden.
yeah, and
It's so obvious. It's
You're right.
unobvious. It's so on the nose because halfway through the series, I went, I just did not put it together until somewhere in the middle of Last Crusade. Everything about your favorite movies of this type of genre. You're a Mission Impossible fan.
Yeah.
You're a James Bond fan. I mean, you are, I wouldn't say fanatical, but I would say you are a fan of these movies.
Yeah.
Like, I think your heart might pound a little bit faster if you met Karen Allen.
But I wouldn't know anything about that, unlike other people on this podcast.
6 degrees, baby. 6 degrees, baby.
take
You're
credit
right
for it.
there.
Sure.
You're right there. We're right there. I have something to tell you off podcast later
Oh my
on.
God.
Yeah.
Oh,
Anyway, so
well, let me
it
just say
makes
this.
sense. So
Yeah.
Indiana Jones being your favorite movie makes sense because it's the most colorful of that type of genre.
Yeah.
James Bond is very slick.
Mm-hmm.
Mission Impossible is very cloak and dagger. Indiana Jones is all of that,
That's true. Yeah.
but dustier and browner and just like
Realer, which is crazy
Realer,
because of all the
yeah.
stuff that happens.
Right. Exactly. No, that's exactly the thought I went through my mind. And I said, I think I can appreciate your point of view of movies now that I've actually seen all of the Indiana Jones, because you make reference to movies based on, not you, just anybody makes reference to movies based on history of what the knowledge of their movie going experience is. And I've started to click into a few things that you always talk about. There are certain things that you talk about, and it's all based on your love for these films. So
Yeah, I mean, and for me, like hearing about the history of the making of Raiders of the Lost Ark is that, you know, Steven Spielberg, one of his kind of things, especially once he got big in the late 70s, was that he wanted to direct a Bond movie, and
right,
for whatever reason, it wasn't going to happen. And so
it would now.
Yeah, well, probably, but I don't think he's interested in directing a Bond movie now. But back then, that was one of the things he wanted to do. And then so he gets together with Lucas, they spitball stuff, and they're like, his love of James Bond movies and Lucas's love of 30s serials, like you put all that together and you get this iconic character that is not based on a comic book, is not based on a novel, is not, I mean, it is inherently cinematic.
There are now.
Yeah, well, sure. But it's inherently cinematic, and it's something that, once again, doesn't happen very often these days. But so all of that put together, their ability to get Sean Connery to come in, and for Sean Connery to know exactly what to do and how to do it and play against type in a lot of ways. You know, how he bounces off of Denholm Elliott's character, Marcus Brody, and just how they're like, when those guys get together, they're like super dorks, and you know they're quoting different literary things, and they're just and just the way that he's kind of like bumbling in a lot of ways. He's kind of like anti James Bond in this movie, but you get that kind of like homage to James Bond and the character, but it's kind of like an Easter egg, you know? It's like they're kind of just like tipping their hat and saying like, you know what? Yeah. And the other reason why I like James Bond, Mission Impossible, all those, is that the more films you have in those series, like we were talking about earlier, there is a codified kind of like there's an Indiana Jones toolkit, there's a Mission Impossible toolkit, there's a James Bond toolkit, and there's things that the movie makers can reference and that they can call back to, and that is kind of like an inside joke or an inside, like if you've seen all the Indiana Jones movies, you know this, you know that Q is going to say, pay attention 007. You know that Indiana Jones is going to meet some big dude that he's going to have to fight, and it's probably not not going to go how you think it's going to go. So it's all of those things where it's like, if you just watch one of these movies, it's still a movie and you'll still have fun and you'll pay your money and you'll go home at the end. But if you look at them as a whole, you get that added benefit. I mean, to a certain extent, the MCU is the same way, you know, where there's all these things that are built in that you get more out of if you've seen the last 22 other movies, but the movies will hopefully hold up on their own. I think that's becoming less and less tenable as this project goes on, as the MCU goes on. But you know, either way, I think Indiana Jones, it has that, especially by the third film, and they really play into that. So that's why I love that third film so much.
All right, let's transition into the new movie. And my first question is, what is the history behind why Spielberg did not do this film?
So Spielberg was supposed to do it. He worked with David Koepp, who wrote Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. He wrote a bunch of stuff. He wrote Panic Room, actually, the David Fincher movie. He wrote Lost World, I think. He's written a few Spielberg movies. So Spielberg and David Koepp worked on it. Harrison Ford was on board. Then they started doing pre-production, and then they got into a thing, I guess, with Lucasfilm, and they weren't able to. The other producers and other the people putting up the money weren't able to agree on something associated with the plot and with the script. So he pushed pause on it, because at that time it was like 2019, I think 2018. He was doing The Post. When did The Post come out? 2017, 2018? He did The Post and Ready Player One at the same time, pretty much. So he shot Ready Player One. They did post-production on Ready Player One. He shot The Post with Meryl Streep, Tom Hanks, all those guys, like in like whatever it was, like 2 months, 3 months. And then he was dealing with, releasing both of those. And then he ended up kind of like pushing it back. And then finally they just ran out of time to a certain extent, and he started wanting to move forward. So he became an executive producer on the film, and David Koepp was still on as the screenwriter. Once they decided to bring James Mangold in, I think David Koepp, from what it sounds like, saw the writing was on the wall, and he didn't want to really like push his stuff on James Mangold, who is a co-writer of a lot of his movies and also has worked with other writers. He worked with Jez Butterworth and John Henry Butterworth on this one, like they did on the previous movies. Like I think his previous movie before this, they worked together too. So that's why you'll see like David Koepp gets screenwriting credit along with Mangold and the two Butterworths. They all get credit because there's a lot of writers on there. And then, of course, you have to say that the character itself was created by George Lucas and Philip Kaufman from the first one, so they get credit too. I don't know how that works, story or something like that. They get some sort of story credit. But so it's a lot of writers. And when you see it on screen, you're just like, oh, God. But James Mangold and his writers that he worked with, they came up with, I think, like a completely different script. There must be some sort of through line that forced or allowed David Koepp to get some credit as a part of the screenwriting team, but it's mostly Mangold and the guys that Mangold works with did this script. Now maybe Koepp came up with the Dial of Destiny. I don't know. I'm not really sure.
It could simply be that they just didn't take anything from him, but gave him credit so he could keep his insurance.
Could
and he
do
could
that
get
too.
A paycheck, and it happens all the time.
Yeah.
It happens all the time. Okay, so then why not Spielberg? I'm still not following that. He had an argument with the Lucas people?
Yeah, the plot that he wanted to do, it didn't jive with Lucasfilm. Now, I think this was right around the time that, I don't know if it was before or after Lucasfilm got sold to Disney. It was after, I think. Lucasfilm got sold to Disney.
4 films, there's a problem with what Spielberg's ideas were?
Yeah.
And so they went ahead and made the very last and 5th Indiana Jones.
I wouldn't say that.
Okay.
We'll have to talk about that later.
Okay.
But I wouldn't say this is the last Indiana Jones movie.
Everybody says it is. So I'm not saying it is. I'm not saying it's not. I'm saying by all standards, people are saying this is the last one.
It's the last movie that Harrison Ford will act in as a human.
Okay. Well, that's scary. Okay. Yeah, I don't even want to go there. It's unbelievable. Anyway, but my thing is that the only requirement I had, and I tried to really, I really don't have expectations. I go into a film and I take it for what it is. Okay. It's hard pressed to not have expectations when it's a Batman film because I'm a Batman fan. You name it, there are certain things you have to have expectations because they mean something, or you have expectations because they mean something to your life. This means something to me because it means something to you, but it doesn't mean something to me like it means something to you. Yeah. So, wow, if that was written in a script, I would never be able to deliver that dialogue. Anyway, so my point is that my only requirement was that it didn't feel so off kiltered from the rest of them, that it did feel like it, I don't want to say it didn't feel like it felt like Spielberg still did it. I don't want to say that. What I want to say is that I needed to know that they were all connected somehow, some way.
Yeah,
and I
needed the Indiana Jones DNA.
It needed more. It needed more. It needed Spielberg.
Interesting.
And I love James Mangold. Yeah. Like his bio is, I love his movies.
Yeah.
I mean, Girl Interrupted, I love. I fight people, Walk the Line.
Logan.
I fight people over Girl Interrupted because people are like, oh, I'm like, shut up. You don't know what I'm sorry, that's mean. Please be quiet. You are incorrect. But I have nothing against James Mangold. I just think there's a thumbprint that's missing from this film. That's Spielberg's thumbprint. This way that he does things that look like film sets, but still look fantastical enough to look like real places. His tones and his colors that he chooses. I texted you some stuff. Aren't you proud of me, by the way?
Yeah.
I texted you some stuff.
Like a list of things that we're going to talk about. I'm amazed.
Were you shocked when you saw it? I was like, let me send this. I sent it today, but it's still better late than never, right? And one of my points was everything in the series up to Dial of Destiny, and with the exception of Temple of Dooms, are tans and browns and golds. Everything. The shadow work in Raiders is what makes it cinematography interesting, however you say that. Interesting. I'm not going to try to say it again. It's interesting looking. And then he kind of tones down the shadows throughout the series, but they're still there. There's a few, blah, blah, blah.
They're there in Crystal Skull.
Yeah. And there's one here in Dial of Destiny, but it seems like because it's part of the sequence that it's not like an homage or something. And then Temple of Doom is very red and gold, right? It's the only one that has more color in it, and rightly so, because you're talking about a guy once again punches through a guy's chest, so the reds make sense. But it's the only one up until this one, and this one doesn't look like an Indiana Jones film. It only barely feels like it for me. That said, I enjoyed this movie, and I have no problem with the movie as an action-adventure film. I just wish I had felt like I was watching an Indiana Jones film. Now, that said, it might have a lot to do with that. I just watched all four back-to-back before I saw the fifth one. Mm-hmm. So it might have stood out. It's darker. I can't see stuff as well. And I don't remember experiencing any of these films in the theater, so I don't know what they look like on the big screen. So it could have something to do with that. But a lot of it it feels like somebody made a Mission Impossible / James Bond film, but with Indiana as the main character. It does not feel like an Indiana Jones film to me. It just doesn't. And I'm not saying that's necessarily a bad thing. I'm just saying for me personally, I needed the shadow effect. I needed the golds. I needed the tans. I needed that kind of poppy, glossy look that the first couple of films have. It's almost, it it looks so unreal. It looks real, if that makes sense.
Well, it's impressionistic lighting, I think, is what you're looking for. Yeah, you're looking for, it's unnatural lighting. I mean, the lighting that Douglas Slocum, who shot the first 3 movies, I mean, this is a guy, Douglas Slocum was the cinematographer, and he was at the end of his 50-year career when he did these movies. I mean, he had a storied career as a cinematographer, and he knew his craft up and down, and he knew how to utilize those the lighting and like slit lighting that they do a lot with. Like we talked about that when I was talking about The Love Witch last episode, where, you know, kind of like just the eyes are lit, or silhouettes, which we've talked about, or just like shadows falling on a character, or obscuring a portion of someone's face or someone's body, you know, with shafts of light, things like that. I mean, all of that is all, you know, that's like his forte. And then after that, you know, you have people trying to replicate it. And this is, I think, where you're getting into your, like, you know, I know you don't want to say that it doesn't look like a Spielberg film, but that's kind of what you mean. And it makes me wonder what they decided, what James Mangold decided to do, if he decided to just like make his movie, which most directors, especially if you're a director, you get into this level of film directing, you're just going to make your own movie. But there's a possibility that he was trying to replicate old Indiana Jones movies, and that's probably never going to work out if you try to do something that you think that Steven Spielberg would do, because that would be bad.
Let me clarify. I'm not saying I'm trying to skirt around the statement that it doesn't look like a Steven Spielberg film. I'm trying to say that when I say it doesn't look like an Indiana Jones film, it's not an insult to James Mangold. It's just a fact for me. It doesn't look or feel like an Indiana Jones film. It doesn't. And I understand that's actually a really good way to, I mean, you just helped me with that though, because you're saying that it would be devastating for James Mangold to go into it to try to make it look like a Spielberg film.
Yeah.
That makes sense. But at the same time, these films look a certain way. And so we need some form of acknowledgement, homage, some form of turn that lighting up. It looks like blah, blah, blah. Make a joke out of it, something to make the transition easier for us, because and you were talking about there's a toolbox. There's a toolbox for this film. There's a toolbox for that film. The way that those, even Crystal Skull to a degree, still have a certain look about them. There is an unnatural, realistic look about them, if that makes sense, if that's not an oxymoron. And I'm just saying that there has to be that's part of it. It's not just the hat and the whip and Marion. It's not just those things. Yeah. It's all, the whole thing.
But it's also
looks and feels a certain way. And also, what were you getting ready to say?
It's also the music. It's also
right, which is weirdly used in this film.
And
it's weirdly used.
Oh, interesting.
I think it's weirdly used. I got enough
out of the music, and then I also definitely got enough out of the sound effects, and you know, the punches and the, you know, the gunfire and all that.
These are observations, not criticisms. Okay, sure. Let me make that clear. It's an observation that I have, and maybe I'm trying to like be kind to James Mangold because I love his work, and I don't want people to think I'm insulting him. When you put a character on a plane in an Indiana Jones film, the next shot should be the red line.
I agree. That was a misstep.
It's weird. It's weird. And then you put them in the plane, and then you see the red dots, okay, which is dotted because they go across country, which I liked. I thought that was clever. Mm-hmm. And then back to the river. Dun, 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 dun. That's when that happens in every other film. It doesn't happen in this one. There is not. There's that wind and the rain and the plane propellers and stuff like that. And in most of the other
there's like a crossfade. It's never like you don't see just the map. You see a crossfade between the map and the actual plane image. So they did that.
Am I mistaken that in all the other films, when you see the plane, you hear the theme music?
Yeah.
Okay. Why? Yeah. Okay. But with all due respect, why would you change something that, I mean, I was like, it pulled me out. It pulled me out. I had a really good time in this film. It's a popcorn summer movie. That the theater was not packed, but pretty full. And people were moving and shouting and screaming and like a roller coaster ride. It was really a lot of fun. And I can't emphasize that enough. I will see it again. I cannot wait to see it again. But somebody made a point, I think it was in a review I read, that when you watch Temple of Doom, you couldn't wait for The Last Crusade. When you watched The Last Crusade, you couldn't wait for The Crystal Skull. Of course, we're waited quite a bit of time in between those two films. And this one, you're waiting for a moment in your history, okay? And when you go see this new one, something is missing. It's missing.
Well, I am a little bit more favorable about it. I think that they bit off a lot. I mean, they've got an 80-year-old leading actor who is fit. I mean, he's
Ridiculous.
able to move around, and
we should all be so lucky to take our shirt off and look like that.
There you go. I mean,
which is what he does in every other film. He takes his shirt off at some point.
Oh, in Indiana Jones movies?
And then Temple of Doom, it's half off, half on.
Oh, yeah. Wait, does he do it in Crystal Skull? I can't remember if he does it in Crystal Skull. But either way, but yeah. So, I mean, well, there's in Raiders, it was... Oh, you're like going through your mental Rolodex?
I'm trying to think. Yeah, I mean, because, with all due respect, I never realized Harrison Ford was such a handsome guy. I just didn't. I just thought he was Indiana Jones and Han Solo. I didn't think of him as a guy. And then I rewatched these movies and I was like, he is a hunk of burning love.
He's
is
charming,
really good looking, man.
And he is good looking. I mean, he makes you feel like he could, as a 50-year-old guy, land a 20-something-year-old girl in Last Crusade, even though that's kind of funky and weird and it's awkward anyway. But she obviously has ulterior motives as to why
it's gross.
Why to get
it's
him.
It's just gross.
It is. I mean, but
it's
just saying,
the connection to the father that makes it gross.
That's even. Oh yeah.
That was a step too far.
It's funny though. Like it's a really that line when she leans in and they're both back to back, and she says, "I'll never forget our night together," and she's like, "You were amazing," and he's like, "Oh, well, thank you." I don't know. It's funny. I think it's funny.
It's gross.
But sure. Yeah, that too. But anyway, so I think that the things that I was a little bit more sensitive to were the first 20 minutes where they de-age Indiana Jones, where they de-age Harrison Ford because it's a flashback. And it seems they did a lot, like the face replacement, all that stuff. The de-aging, we've seen it before in Marvel movies and in other movies, but they had to make it so dark so that they could kind of get away with a lot. If it was a very well lit train car, it would have been a little bit harder, I think. And he's in such a large amount of the movie in that, with that face replacement that I think they made a lot of concessions to be able to do that. Because they needed action. And I felt like that train car action piece was good. I mean, we've seen train car action scenes in Indiana Jones movies before. And I got a good kind of like charge out of that. I felt like it was believable as far as like what the characters were doing at that time. But there was always a little bit of like, that it's not uncanny valley to me because it does look really good, but it was kind of like I could see all of the concessions they were having to make to be able to get to where they were and to be able to have him in this much of the movie. And it made me feel kind of like, wish there was a better way, wish there was a different way. But I think it was also a proof of concept for what they could potentially do in the future. And
yeah, he looks good at that face replacement looks good. It's Mads Mikkelsen that I think looks weird.
Yeah, I mean,
he looks glossy.
Well, that's true. I mean, I think they did because they spent a lot less time on Mads Mikkelsen than they did on Harrison Ford.
But my understanding is that they used old footage of Harrison Ford as a younger guy to do that facial replacement stuff, and they don't have that with Mads. Well, do they?
Sure.
They might.
I'm sure
they might.
The way they do that is the way because the company is Lola is who does that like facial replacement, and so they can use old footage to train. They use like computer machine learning to get different angles of. They did this with Robert Downey Jr. They used all of his footage from movies in the 80s when they did his face replacement for and de-aging for Iron Man. Captain America: Civil War, right at the beginning of that.
Yes, with the hologram or whatever you call it.
So because they had so many images and so much footage of him younger, that's why it looks so good. But you're right. I mean, Mads Mikkelsen, they have a lot less. I think he probably acted when he was younger, but I don't know how many movies he acted in. And Harrison Ford acted in a bunch of movies in the 80s. Yeah. So
all of which they own.
Yeah, well, there you
all
go.
of which these people own.
So then they've got all that information that they can feed into the computer. And so because I believe he acted a lot of that on the train set and all that stuff, and then they just de-aged him. But there's still a lot of fill that has to happen because his face is going to be larger, and his cheeks are going to be farther out, and just there's a lot of stuff that needs to get cleaned up as far as that's concerned. So I mean, from a technical standpoint, I think it's a good proof of concept, but I mean, you can imagine a future where there are Indiana Jones movies that include Harrison Ford's likeness, and they do a complete head replacement or face replacement on an actor, kind of like they did in The Social Network, where they replaced what's his name? Peck, I think is his name. The actor, I can't remember his first name, but they replaced his face with Armie Hammer's face. So the benefit of that is they were able to have Armie Hammer on set with that lighting, and then do the scene, and then they could do the facial replacement. But then they had Armie Hammer with like the whatever dots or whatever they had on it. Same thing with Benjamin Button that David Fincher did with Benjamin Button, where you do a full on head replacement or face replacement. But I could totally see that, and it's Disney and it's Lucasfilm, and there's no. I mean, if Harrison Ford signs off on it, or his estate or whatever, or Callista Flockhart or whoever signs off on it, then there's nothing preventing them from making more Indiana Jones movies. Because for me, Indiana Jones would be weird if it wasn't Harrison Ford. Like, it's not James Bond in that way. Like, it's so iconic because he's never been replaced, and the series has gone on for 40 something years. So it just wouldn't be the same as like, oh, this is the third James Bond since I've been alive. No big deal. We're about to have a fourth. So it's a different thing. It's a different feel. It's not the same for me. The character wouldn't be the same for me. But then I have to confront the fact that would I even want to go see, like, how would I deal with that on a political level, not politics as far as Republican, Democrat, but political as far as like, actors. I mean, like, what do you feel about it? What would you feel about, I guess there's two questions. What would you feel about your likeness being used in art that you would not see and that you wouldn't have any kind of like approval over? And then how do you feel about viewing art or experiencing art where that could happen?
I'll simplify it for myself. Just because you can doesn't mean you should. Just because we can do this doesn't mean it's a good idea. And I mean, you could say that with almost all AI if you're going to look at it that way.
Sure.
But I mean, the world progresses, technology progresses. Would I want to be hooked to a phone line to download, some new movie or upload some new movie? No, I'm glad I can pull it out of my pocket and make reference to IMDb immediately, and I can text you with people who have been nominated for Emmys instantaneously. I love all that. So, technology will evolve, and I'll be okay with that. I don't know. I don't know how to look at that properly because we're not in that world. So a 15-year-old nowadays doesn't know anything but having a cell phone. So to actually tell them they should be not using their cell phone and they should be reading a book or they should be seeing a movie and they should not pull up their phone, They should not pull up their phone in the middle of a movie because it blinds everybody behind them. They can't understand that concept because their phone has been in their hand from day one. So I don't know if we're at a period in our lives where we could actually conceptualize what that means. I think it's weird when you start talking about like going to a concert and it being a hologram. That's weird. But at the same time, a percentage of myself goes, wow, I could see Freddie Mercury live. That might be interesting. I'm of two worlds. Do I think it's okay if somebody signs off on their image and is used? It happens all the time. Their image is being used for ads and promotions and ideas and to get people to come to the theater. It's being used all the time.
But they're opting into that. They're agreeing to the content that is being that their likeness is being displayed with.
Harrison Ford doesn't own this property.
Correct.
He is owned by the property. His image is owned by them. His image as Indiana Jones is a product. So I can't tell Coke what to do with their product or Pepsi what to do with their product. If Pepsi wants to change their can to all red and Coke wants to change their can to all blue, that's wrong because that's not the way they've ever looked and that's not the way it's ever been done, but that's their product. And a human being as a product is a strange concept, but we've been dealing with it for hundreds of years now, and where somebody's image becomes the advertisement. You know, the clown from Ringling Brothers, you know, was on the side of circus cars and trains and stuff. And so it went through a town. You knew what it was because of that image. So my instinct is to say I really couldn't take a guess at how I'd feel about it because I'm not in that league. I don't understand those concepts of actually taking my image and using it. But everything comes to a point where it becomes public domain, you know, like the Happy Birthday song. Didn't that just recently become public domain?
It did, yeah.
So like up to that point, you couldn't just use the Happy Birthday song. Well, I mean, people did, but, you know, like eventually all of Elvis Presley's music will become public domain. Now, I think it's way more interesting to have an actor play Elvis Presley in a movie than it is to put Elvis Presley in a bio about himself. Like if Baz Luhrmann had done facial, whatever you call it, transferring or whatever it's called.
Yeah.
Replacement. Thank you. I couldn't think of that word at that second. It would have been weird to me, but conceptually speaking, I understand it. So I'm not worried about the world taking over and AI taking over and the world changing its views to just watching an artificial Harrison Ford. But if they do that, the only thing that is required is they better come up with a reason to do that.
Yeah.
There better be a damn good story. And everybody's talking about AI taking over writers and blah, 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 blah. You can put a bunch of things into a computer and it can come up with a great story. Sure, it's going to be able to knock out the 13th millionth episode of Law and Order, which I like. I'm not dissing on Law and Order. It's just an example where it's this structural thing that in the second act, this happens. In the first act, this happens. This is the killer, blah, blah, blah. Will AI be able to create that? Yes, they will. But will AI be able to come up with the relationship of Marion and Indiana Jones? Never. Never. I mean, it's a bold statement, but how could it? Unless we feed it that stuff.
Which means it came from us at some point.
Correct.
Yeah.
And human beings are infinitely creative and they come up with different stories, all based on something that happened with the Greek time. It's all based on all those stories that the Greeks came up with. And we're just, the Greeks, Shakespeare, and the Bible. That's all we're stealing from. That's it. And we're just doing it over and over and over and again. And AI probably could come up with some bangers, you know, by taking that material and feeding it. But it's never going to be the same. It's just not. It just isn't. So maybe that's why I don't fear it or worry about it, because plus, you know, more than likely I won't be here. So I
who
won't
cares?
worry about it.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean,
Well-
yeah, no, I care, but
So
I'm not going to lose sleep over facial reconstruction or whatever replacement. I'm not going to lose sleep over it.
So how did you like Phoebe Waller-Bridge?
I loved her.
Me too.
I love her. I love her. I love her line readings are brilliant. Her attitude, she has that sense. So here we go with Marion again. She has that Marion energy that you needed. She has that deceptiveness of, we have to figure out what the lady in The Last Crusade's name is.
Allison Duty? What do you mean?
Yeah, is that her character's name
Oh,
or her?
Ilsa.
I thought she brought a breath of fresh air to the series. I think she needed to be there. I like the fact that it's a female character that's not a romantic character. I like the fact that the female character is strong and has her own ideas. And yes, she's sort of like him in the beginning of the franchise where she's
Fortune
a
and
thief,
glory.
but yeah, right. Fortune and glory. Yeah. Robin Hood, sort of, but to benefit herself. I loved all of it. I like her.
Mm-hmm,
She has a confidence about her that at first I thought this is going to be an odd pairing. Like, this is going to be weird because I hope this isn't like playing on some kind of romantic weird thing with an older guy and younger girl that Hollywood cannot get away from. But then it's very quickly established.
Goddaughter. Yeah.
Yeah. It's very quickly established, and it's Toby Jones's goddaughter. So I'm good.
Yeah.
Anybody related to Toby Jones, I'm good. So yeah, I enjoyed her. I actually am looking forward to seeing it again because of her.
Mm-hmm.
She helps it flow.
What about I'm not gonna like do too many spoilers, but what about the end? Did you how did you feel about like her scene with him? You can't stay here essentially.
I actually, and so it's kind of hard to
I just
talk
said you
about.
can't stay here. I mean that's
Right.
very
Yeah, that was good.
generic.
That's what stopped me, because that was good. I can't do that. I would have said 3 things before and 3 things after, which would have given it away. Anyway, I thought they were going to leave him there, and that would have made sense to me. You already know that his son is what his son is.
Okay, spoilers.
You already
we're
okay,
doing
good.
spoilers.
Okay,
We gotta do spoilers.
good. I'm not
Okay.
going to be able to do it without doing it.
Spoilers
So
from
his
here on,
son's, his son is dead, and his wife wants a divorce. It's very clear.
Mm-hmm.
Separation papers. You see it, which I love the fact that James Mangold does not spoon feed. You have to pay attention to his movie, and I love that. So for him to stay with Archimedes at the end would have made a lot of sense to me, because he would have fit right in. He would have known everything going on in the culture. It would not have been a culture shock. It wouldn't have been a thing, and it would have been a fantastic way to never having Indy come back.
It would have changed history though. Like that's the problem.
I know. So what? We also, okay. So they say, but are there rips in time and space that we can go through 2,000 years in the past?
No. I mean, I get
so
that.
Do we know it will change history? No, we don't.
Well, no, the way that it wouldn't change history is Indiana Jones sitting there for the rest of his life, which could be like another 10 years, who knows? And not saying anything about like, here's how the internal combustion engine works. And, I like all of these like things that would completely revolutionize Archimedes' time. And him just sitting there being like, I guess I'll go to the bathroom in a river, like it's just kind of like.
But it makes sense, because Indiana Jones is his frame of mind is education, but his frame of mind is understanding something to educate people about. So he would have to understand their ways before he would interject anything. And he would spend his next 10 years, whatever it may be, which I think is hilarious that you said it like that. But because who knows?
Yeah.
Because, maybe the cup and the drinking did have a little effect on him. Anyway, there's a whole bunch of fan theories out there by that way.
He would spend all of that time not educating anybody, and
no,
not
he would
even
be learning about the realistic stuff that he studied about his whole life,
and never be able to tell anyone else.
He
horrible.
convinced himself and another person to keep their eyes closed when the Ark of the Covenant was open.
That's true.
He was strong enough to not look.
That's
and he was
true.
strong enough to tell her not to look and be convincing in telling her. because like what's the family that turns to salt pillars because they turn around and
Lot's
look?
wife.
Lots didn't do the same thing.
Oh,
Lots
Lot.
didn't convince. What I say, Lots?
Well, yeah, Lot had a wife
Right.
who doesn't even have a name in the Bible. Great.
Right, but he
Jeez.
spends a fair amount of time saying, "Don't look, don't look,
Yes.
don't look, don't look. Whatever you do, don't look,
Don't
don't
look
look,
back."
don't
Yep.
look." And she looked back.
Of course she did.
So Indy's stronger than him.
Orpheus
'Cause he can-
did the same thing
Right.
in Greek mythology.
Who's it? Abraham, whose son almost gets killed. And
He's told to kill Isaac, and then he's told at the
Right.
very end, okay, you don't have to.
Right, but he's strong enough to actually follow through
Yeah.
with what he's being asked to do. He's more Indiana Jones than Lot is. Because Indiana Jones has convinced two people to keep their eyes closed. So could he have had the willpower to go,
I would
will
love to
doesn't
tell
really
you
work.
about how to design a hot plate so you could heat up your food, but maybe I'll...
after
Back
everything
off.
he's been through and everything he went through over the last 80 years, I think he'd be okay with sitting in a chair on a beach somewhere just hanging out and listen to Archimedes' ideas. I think he would be okay. So I don't necessarily buy into the change history thing.
It's
I
also-
just thought it would be
yeah.
a good way to wrap it up. It'd
Maybe,
be so
but it's
clever
also him giving up, though. Like, that's the thing, is that, like...
because there's so much to look forward to go back.
But hold on, though. But I think that bringing back Karen Allen's Marion Ravenwood, it brings that to a close, and it also makes it worth it. It makes that choice that she made that Phoebe Waller-Bridge makes for him, and makes that worth it, I think.
And just about 2 minutes ago, before I was going into all that, I was going to say yes until Karen Allen gets her elbow kissed. Until
so
then, so good.
So good.
So well played. So she looks beautiful.
She does.
It was meaningful that they did that. And yes, if it wasn't for that ending there, I wish he would have stayed. But because of that ending there, but you don't know that at that. Well,
Sure.
some people knew that, but you don't know that as a film goer at that point, that he's going to reconcile with the love of his life. Because the greatest part about their love story is that what he says to her in The Crystal Skull. He says they all had a problem. And she's like, "What is that?" "They're not you, honey." He says that to her, and she gets that great grin on her face. I love the way she plays that scene, because she is the love of his life. She is the one. Okay. And, he's had a lot of adventure, but she's the one. But you're not thinking about that when that decision is being made to stay. You're thinking, dead son, divorced, the love of my life doesn't want to have anything to do with me, blah, 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 blah. Why not stay here? Why not? And if it wasn't for Marion Ravenwood coming back at the end, I would have wanted him to stay.
Yeah. It's a lot, though, because you think about how his dad was so his dad was so remote to him, like wasn't really accepting of him. You don't know what his relationship is to Mutt after the end of the last movie, because they do get married at the end of of Crystal Skull, and you don't know how the family integrates in, but it makes you wonder if his relationship with Mutt was on a similar track of his relationship with his dad, just reversed. And so, he probably feels a lot of guilt to that. And then, Karen Allen just doesn't, want to have anything, Marion doesn't want to have anything to do with him, after, Mutt decides to go to Vietnam. I guess he goes to Vietnam, somewhat.
Okay.
Early, yeah.
Well, that's actually in the film, though. He talks about that. He talks about his son did the opposite of what he wanted him to do. And I think because Mutt is such a strong personality and is Indiana Jones as a kid, he's going to do whatever he wants to do. And yes, it's very similar to that relationship.
Yeah.
I think actually there's two Indies in that room. There's Mutt and then there's Indiana Jones, and they probably butt heads. So Mutt's going to do the opposite of what Indy wants him to do. And then he says Marion, and his mother couldn't get around the grief.
Yeah.
He says something along that lines. So I don't think it has anything to do with her just giving up on Indiana Jones. I think the grief of her son.
Yeah.
Yeah. She can't. And he is I mean, there's probably a lot of qualities that remind her of both of them, because obvious genetics and stuff like that. So I think he looks like Karen Allen, but acts like Indiana Jones. So, they probably butt heads, and it's probably hard to, as a grieving parent of a child who dies for whatever reason, and then to see a reflection in somebody, or to see a way you move your shoulder, the way you move your face. It's like, that's hard. That grief is,
it's unimaginable.
I can't. Yes, that's the word I was looking for. So I don't know. It's an interesting question. I'm glad that the movie ended the way that it ended. It does seem like it's the end of the series. So that should be the answer to the AI question.
Well, what do you think about the iris down on the hat, and then him reaching out and grabbing the hat at the end? Just like he did in Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. The hat's at the ground, on the floor in front of Mutt. Mutt reaches to pick it up, and then he swoops in and picks it up and puts it on.
I love that. Yeah, you're not indie. Stop.
And I think that's probably why.
Got a way to go, boy.
Yeah, hopefully Lucasfilm will stick to this, where it's like nobody else can be Indiana Jones. And so maybe that's what that's saying, is that nobody else can wear this hat. That's the only thing.
Well, I don't know if it's I'm going to be Indiana Jones and have adventures past my 80th birthday, or just a reminder that he owns that hat, and he is Indy because of that hat, and he's Indy to us, and it's just it's a security blanket with him. He's constantly losing it and constantly picking it up throughout the whole entire 40 years of this history.
The tropes.
And I love the dust coming off of it in Raiders as he's running. I love that. It's well done. I'm wondering how long it took them to figure out how to do that, because once the dust goes, but he's running for quite a bit. It's a couple different takes, so they had to probably keep piling it on. Anyway, technical stuff that my mind goes to. So I don't think it's an indication that his journey goes on. I think it's an indication that he is who he is, and that's it. And that's my hat. And screw you, audience members. No, you're not going to be Indiana Jones, any more than anybody else will be, because there was talk about Chris Pratt, there was talk about people taking over,
I hope not.
and you're right, it's too late to do that. It's too late.
It's been 40 years. Like, it's not.
It's too late. It's too late.
From the first James Bond was 1962, and then he got replaced in 68 by by the Australian guy. I'm totally blanking on his name. Why am I doing that? I can't think of it.
I thought there was one
George
first
Lazenby.
for one.
So it was.
Oh, I thought he was first.
No. It's well, I mean, they had a TV show, an American TV show, and American played a guy named Jimmy Bond. But the first movie was 1962, Dr. No, and then 68, On Her Majesty's Secret Service was George Lazenby, and then he came back for Diamonds Are Forever. Connery did, but then in like 73 or something, 71, I don't know, 73, something like that, is when Live and Let Die, and you had Roger Moore. So within like 10 years, you had 3 James Bonds in 10 years. So it had been established.
3 very different James Bonds. Yeah, very different. So that makes sense.
It had been established, and then obviously Mission Impossible is going to be the same way. Like, they're just going to have to hang it up whenever Tom Cruise decides that he wants to die on screen and makes the last Mission Impossible.
But I would venture to say one could discuss very heavily over drinks at a party that Tom Cruise could be replaced because he's not as indelible of a character as Harrison Ford as Indiana Jones is.
That makes sense.
Because other than the half cut off gloves and the wire hanging over top of, name a quality about that character that you can say, I'm dressed as Ethan Hunt from Mission Impossible. As soon as you walk into a party with the whip and the hat, you're Indiana Jones, and people have been doing it for decades. So, I mean,
there are less of the tropes. I mean, just the silhouette of Indiana Jones is immediately recognizable. So, whereas you don't really have that with Ethan Hunt. So it's just, it's a different thing. So, all right. So did you have anything else?
No.
I'm just trying to think if I had any. Let me look on here.
I just think that this is the type of movie that you just go to a movie to have a fun experience,
Yeah.
and it's a fun roller coaster ride. I mean, it's got some issues for me, but my issues aren't necessarily about the movie that they made. It's about the history and why they chose to do it the way that they did for the possible last one, whatever it can be.
I will say, yes, I hear you. And as far as their choices are concerned, I believe that they did miss an opportunity to, because the moon landing was a big deal, in 1969. It was centered around New York. The moon landing, that was what contemporized the story and put us in that place in history. But I felt like in the same way that they shoved in, nuclear testing and aliens in the 1950s Indiana Jones, I don't know why they didn't go into like more conspiracy theories or, things as far as like moon landings or not aliens, but just like focusing in on space exploration or moving forward, like even going to space. Like, I mean, what's the difference between going back in time and going to space? Not really a lot when you think about it. So, having some sort of like other apparatus to get to space, or something that, maybe the Mads Mikkelsen character is looking into doing something like that, and so I don't know. It just seemed like there's a lot of potential if you try to, instead of trying to go back to Nazis and go back to the well one more time, it seems like that seemed like it was an opportunity that was maybe just left on the table. But I mean, the concept that Mads Mikkelsen has, the fact that he did want to go back in time, not to win win World War II as a follower of Hitler, but to go back and kill Hitler, which so many people people are like, oh, that's the one thing that you should do, go back and kill Hitler and everything would be fine. Well, this guy's like, no, Hitler was the problem. And like, that's kind of a new and interesting, like, oh yeah, this is an interesting take. I don't know. I had not really thought of it that way, because we kind of like think of it as a monolith. We think of it like Hitler was the only reason why the World War II started. Well, I mean, it's a lot more complex than that, and Hitler is a horribly bad dude, but at the same time, that wasn't the only thing. So I don't know. And just the fact that like Mads Mikkelsen could be worse than Hitler, that was also creepy. So I mean,
well, I figured Nazis, they're always bad, and they're always like, why not? It's been the Nazis throughout this whole entire series, with the exception of
Temple and Kingdom.
Yeah. So of course, when they all change into their Nazi uniforms, I was like, yeah, there they are.
Even the Alabama guy, even Boyd Holbrook, who just I've missed out on, or not. I just don't understand Boyd Holbrook. It seems like he needs a gimmick. He's one of the like guard guys of Mads Mikkelsen with the Southern accent. Like in this movie, he's got fake teeth. In Logan, which is another James Mangold movie, he has the robotic arm thing. So I don't know. It seems like he's trying really hard, and I don't get it, but
he's working.
Yeah. So.
He's getting a paycheck as an actor. His tax returns say actor, so I start there.
Okay.
And then I figure it out, and then I go, he's in a position that neither of us have ever experienced. So somebody likes him. Somebody likes him, and
he's also playing against Mads Mikkelsen too, so that's got to be hard.
I think he did his job. Yeah. I think it's impossible to stick out at that point, and he did his job, and he didn't get in the way.
Okay.
I mean, which I don't think he would think is a great critic compliment. He didn't get in anybody's way.
You were unremarkable.
You didn't bother me at all. Well, I mean, that's basically what we're saying, and that's basically how I felt. I thought it was okay with the time riff or the space riff. I thought that was okay. I see what you're saying about the moon landing, and it could have been solved in one problem or one sentence. Somebody could have been watching it and made, hey, Indy, watch this. One of his students, when they brought the TV in, watch this.
That's exactly what they were doing.
He could have easily said, this rock is infinitely more interesting because it's real. That's on TV. And look, that shadow's weird. Is this really happening? It could have easily been solved to where it could have been just the backdrop and not a plot or a narrative position where you're using the moon landing for something later on for them to go up to space, and like you were talking about. I think it was fine. It's all because of that ticker tape parade. That's
why they added it in there.
They wanted the horse.
That was the
they
chase
wanted
scene.
a horse. They wanted it one of the chase scenes.
Well,
so
you're right. Yeah. That tuk or whatever it is, the little cart thing that little chasing. Yeah. I liked it. I liked that.
I did too.
Yeah.
I did
it was
too.
fun.
I did too.
It was actually well edited. There's a lot of other parts of the movie that were not edited as well to me. And editing is like probably maybe the number one thing in most Steven Spielberg movies, but specifically in Indiana Jones movies, where it's just super tight. And this was not edited by the same editor. Well, in fact, I think this was edited by 3 different editors. So I don't know what that says, but yeah, it was, there were certain, I guess that does make sense because there were certain scenes I think that were edited very well, like the tuk chase, but then there were other scenes that were just a bit sloppy for me, like when she's trying to sell that stuff and he comes in and there's a bunch of guys, that kind of like hot potato scene. It was a little bit funky. I wasn't sure where things were in that. And that's like kind of Indiana Jones bread and butter. That's the scene where where everything is because of
where the cup, where the ball is under the cup.
Where camera movement, it adds into, keeping your eyes in the right spot on the screen and focusing on the right things and not focusing on the ancillary things. So that part to me, I missed a lot of that on some level in this movie.
So we spent an hour and 45 minutes talking about all these films, and it comes down to one thing. This film should have been directed by Steven Spielberg.
Okay.
I
mean, it would have been better.
Just the history alone. I'm not saying it would have been better. He did direct the second Jurassic Park film, and I don't understand that movie. I don't understand the T-Rex in San Diego.
I think that was written by David Koepp.
Yeah, so he definitely, I see why he did it, but it doesn't work for me. Anyway, that said, there's 50 years of history of his movies working for me. I'm not saying it would have been better. I just don't understand why you would make it after all this time without him. And we talked about why, and there's some rationale behind it, and I get it. And I love James Mangold. I'll say that till the cows come home. But I just, historically speaking, something about, even if this was a bonkers film directed by Spielberg and worse than Crystal Skull, it still would have been Spielberg. And I think if Spielberg, God forbid, had passed away, or Spielberg was incapacitated in a way, and that's the reason why he couldn't make the movie, that would be one thing. I would also question anybody who would want to continue the franchise without Spielberg if he wasn't on this planet. God forbid that happens anytime soon. But the bottom line is that for me, I'll repeat it from the very beginning, I enjoyed this film. I had a great time. I'll probably see it again in the theaters because it's fun. It's a lot of fun. But there is a sense that something is askew for me. And I think it comes down to Spielberg. Just does.
All right. Last but not least, did you get the secret Bowie?
Yes, of course I did.
Good.
And of course Oddity. I did. When the neighbors were playing the music too loud and then you hear Bowie later on. Yeah. I was like, how are they going to do this? And then I realized that it's going to take place in 1969. So I was like, oh yeah, okay, that'll be there. Yeah.
This is just another notch in the belt of, movies using David Bowie songs. As a default, you can start there and then build your movie out from David Bowie. How about that?
Yeah, absolutely. No doubt. Yeah, but I probably you said it was stealth, or you said something
It
in
was
your
stealth
text.
Bowie is what I said. Because it wasn't,
Right.
it was like I thought he was like, he could hear it out of the window. He was like walking away. It wasn't like, let's sit down and listen to David Bowie. And it wasn't one of those like, it was diegetic. So it was within the movie as opposed to like something playing while somebody's, the Mean Streets, Jumpin' Jack Flash, and Robert De Niro's walking into the room. So it's not that. It is kind of just out there, very low volume as he's walking away type of a thing. So it's not done in the same way that a lot of other songs are done.
And because I just said what I said about Spielberg, I'll say something about James Mangold. He is definitely great at having the audience see what they're supposed to see when they're supposed to see it. You see the picture of Marion, you see the separation papers, you hear the Bowie song. I would have picked up on it even if you hadn't said anything. I would have heard it. Whether or not it would have stuck out, or I would have gone, yeah, Bowie again, here we go. Of course. He does a really good job at, you're supposed to see the dial work a certain way. You're supposed to see things happen a certain way. He does a really good job at keeping your focus where it's supposed to be, at least in most of the film. So.
Yeah. All right. Sounds good. You can check us out on the web at actorandengineer.com. You can go to facebook.com/actorandengineer. We are on Twitter at actorengineer. I guess I'll get us on Threads maybe. I don't know. And you can find us on YouTube. Just search for the Actor and the Engineer podcast. And we'll see you next time.